So today we're going to talk about one of the treatments that we created for Adidem Asterisks in the summer called Sophisticated Fun. We're going to go through the initial treatment that was sent to us and then how we repitched back the idea to Nico, the owner of the company. So I'm really excited to actually jump into the details and go into the process of how we actually got to the final result, how I got the job. So the relationship with Adidem Asterisks is a little bit different. We've been working with them for quite a while now. So we've built up a relationship between us. We have some rapport. We understand where their business is going, and we've built up trust with them over time as well. So whenever Nico reaches out, we have a pretty good sense of how their voice is and how they actually want to create their concepts. The original brief, it was a little bit more standard and basic, not in a bad way. It was just more of a simple idea that Nico wanted to execute on, and he eventually did execute on this, and it looks great. It wasn't necessarily something storytelling wise that we were trying to go for, which is something that we always try to push for when we work with them. They gave us something a little bit more as a basis, a foundation, also to give us an idea of what the products would look like. And then from there, we kind of did a pitch back, and typically with agencies and clients, you're going to be able to pitch back. But with Adidem, we have a bit of a more open and transparent relationship with them. So he trusts us to come up with interesting ideas for his brand, things that he would typically not think about himself. And that's the benefit of creating this rapport and relationship with clients, is that you can actually go out and bring your unique voice to the brand. For us, at least, the biggest thing we wanted to make sure was that we were highlighting the clothing in the best way. We wanted to attack this with a more of a narrative approach and figure out a way to highlight everything in a more cohesive way, a more storytelling way. That's something that actually works for our portfolio really well, but at the same time, we knew it was going to work really well for him. With this season, there was a lot of prints and colors. We told him like, hey, I think we could do something a little bit bigger and a little bit more extravagant. And that's just typically our style. How do we take something that's given to us that's maybe considered small or like a base idea and then really push it to the max? And from there, it's a little bit more fun for us. We get to create something that's like very unique to the style of Adidem and like kind of continue building out this world that they're creating, which is this like kind of vintagey, old school, but like great storytelling when it comes to their content. And what we landed on was a therapy session. So how we got there was Nico had sent me the entire fall season's catalog, which gave me all the names of the products as well. Some of them were the Sherlock Homie, the tracksuit, the Picasso bug print. The second I thought about the therapy pant, I thought about, wait, why don't we just kind of build this therapy session out? And from there, allow us to actually weave all these different storylines together. And that's kind of the basis of this entire project. How do we build a story that actually can showcase a lot of different unique areas and scenarios while at the same time highlighting the clothing? And with that in mind, we decided to actually flesh it out and then create the treatment for Nico. The treatment. So this treatment's a little bit different from the standard. Typically with an agency brief, or if we were doing a larger brief for another company that's fresh or new, they typically would want something a little bit more fleshed out that has the look and feel, as well as like everything sorted out, right? Wardrobe, look and feel, characters, especially the direction as well. So with this one in mind, we had a pretty short timeline to turn this around as we were trying to release this in the fall season. And so just to kind of give a quick clarity of like how we approach this stuff, we kept this one very simple. Again, there's different ways to do this, and you can actually spend a lot more time on these treatments because this is everything. When you present these to clients and to different brands, you want to make sure that everything you have in your brain is very clearly outlined in this brief. Because if you send this brief off and they don't get it, or they don't get the clear direction, then sometimes you might not have the opportunity to actually sell it to them. And so my suggestion is always present this. It's always better to present these live so you can give them answers right away if they have any questions. But at the same time, they can kind of gauge how you're going to approach this, and then the voice and the energy that you're going to provide as well. So making sure that whenever you create these, you have the intention that you're going to be presenting it and that it makes sense and flows the whole way through. With this intro, we wanted to talk about the therapy session inspired by the therapy print with Uzi / Temi lying on the reclined chair. So this kind of set up the whole foundation for everything. We wanted to play up on this therapy session based off the therapy print, and then creating these like memories that the main character was going to have, and each of them related to a new piece of clothing from the 23 season. Again, this is like taking everything we talked about, everything inspiration wise, into a simple treatment that if you're trying to move fast, it's going to be a little bit simpler. But if you're spending time selling this to a client, make sure you spend a lot more time diving into the details of this. So we dove straight into this one. We had the therapy session right off the jump. So this is a little bit different from the standard. We decided to actually end up putting the storyboard as well as the story all together. So it made a little bit more sense for the client when it came to reading this out and understanding this. So we said, stuff like dolly into the therapy session and to focus in on the therapist as Uzi is talking in the background. Originally we had Nico, but again, all these characters switched. So that's the big thing too. It's like, this is a rough foundational template when we sell this to the client, but stuff like this always changes. The big thing here was that both Nico and the main character, or the therapist and the main character, were going to be wearing the fits from the 2023 season, which made the wardrobing very simple and straightforward. Everything was wardrobed directly from Nico and the team, so it made wardrobing very simple for this. So the biggest idea here was that we were going to have the main character not talk at all. Everything was going to be from the voice of the therapist, and from there we were just going to have the therapist relay all these things that the main character had just said. That way we could avoid actually all of the dialogue. Whenever you have more dialogue scenes, it actually adds onto the timing for the project itself. So we wanted to minimize that, as getting the right lines would be really difficult, especially given the timeline of about the 1 day that we had to shoot. From there, we shift focus to the therapist. So if I'm hearing this right, in this dream of yours, you're a detective. This was a really important part for us when we wrote this out, is because the therapist was driving the entire story. Using this line here in this dream, you're a detective, we could hear it from the therapist. And from there, we used Temmie's face to jump into the dream scene, or the scenario scene of him being a detective. So it was fairly straightforward. We just kept going back and forth with this idea that it's going to be jumping back between the therapist and Temmie, the main character, and using each of these scenes based off of the products that they were using. And again, this comes back to the idea of using what's at your disposal when it comes to creating ideas. In this case, Nico gave us a lot to work with the products themselves. You can't necessarily do this for every project, but this one seemed like it worked well because it was the basis of everything. The therapy was based off of the therapy print. The Picasso idea was based off of Picasso bug. And then the tracksuits and the music scenes are all based off of something in the line. So again, the tracksuit is based off of the tracksuit. We added the shot we were going to do here, continuous zooming out shot. So this is a combined storyboard and treatment. It's a little bit different from your standard. This worked for us for this one, but I would say you typically don't want to do it this often because it could get a little confusing. You want to split up your storyboards and your treatments. But in this case, it worked because it was a fairly straightforward shoot. We had minimal dialogue as well as minimal movements in shots. So as long as we knew where the story was going, we knew in the post-production we would be able to figure out a storyboard, the shot listing and everything there and make it a little bit cleaner. But when it came to presenting this in a way that made sense to them, we just wanted to keep it really clean and keep the dialogue in there so they can track everything going forward. Who's going to be talking, what the shot's going to look like. And from there, we can help build out a little bit more of a world so they can see it on a more of a technical scale. And then we're jumping into the Picasso bug, same thing here. Typically, when it comes to references in your treatment, it's good to have it in there just so people know kind of potential shot options that are coming in there. Maybe it's a reference of color, maybe it's a reference of the overall style and the feeling. So if you can do anything to actually bring your client or your viewer closer to the final product, that's even better. You're trying to do as little talking as possible and for them to actually understand what your vision is. When it came to the look and feel, we had a very specific look going into this. We want to go for kind of that vintage film aesthetic, like a 35 mil or like a 16 mil film. Really have this kind of like blue in the shadows and high contrast in the colors itself. You can see in these references, we were going to use some unique shot options as well as color play and color contrast within the space. And secondly, we were going to make sure that kind of the direction and the symmetry was going to be there. And we wanted to play up on this idea that we were kind of in this vintage house because it sat really well with the product itself. So trying to blend what you have creatively into the set design and the creative coloring are all important too as well. There's probably around 4 or 5 options here. We pull all of our references from FrameSet, which is a great place to find photos that are going to work for your projects, as well as highlight the color and the feeling of your project. For us, that was our entire deck. It was fairly straightforward, and we showed that to Nico and we presented it to him as well. And because we have a bit of rapport from the past, he actually just understood it right away. For us, there was really minor tweaks when it came to this. Maybe it was stuff that was specific to how Nico wanted to approach this. But overall, this worked out great for us because he loved the idea. He knew we wanted to elevate the work that we were doing with him. Locations. So when it came to this project, now that we had the creative locked in, it was time to actually move into pre-production. For us, the location was one of the biggest things. So really the biggest challenge was finding a place that didn't crush our budget. And secondly, a place that could film 6 different scenes in one space and allow us to kind of move freely within that because we only had 1 day to shoot this project. So for this one's a little bit different. We typically just go on Set Scouter, but for this option, we had to find something more unique. And I reached out to my friend Abby, who's a production designer that just worked on a project in this house. And so she knew the layout, she knew how it kind of looked from the outside and the inside. So there's always big steps when it comes to projects like this. You have to actually sometimes pay for access to the right places because this place wasn't on Set Scouter and it was a little bit more of a private location. So when it came to that, we paid what we needed to, and we actually got access to it. We reached out and we set a price. It turned out to actually cost a decent amount of the project, but it was worth it because this actually allowed us to shoot everything in that one location, and it checked off every checkbox for us. So once we found the location, next was actually prepping for production design, set design and production design. When it came to production design, I reached out to my friend Abby, who's a production designer. I work with her all the time and tenfold very familiar with working with Abby. She does great work. And I actually ran her through the entire briefing treatment as well, which you should always do. And once we went out there, we actually took a bunch of location scouting photos, figured out where the sun was going to sit for the day, and everything that you need when it comes to pre-production so that you can plan accordingly. For this one, we had to figure out where each scene went. So scene 1 was the therapy scene. This was going to be the main scene for the whole project. And we wanted a reclined therapy chair, a curved chair for the therapist, some notes, and some overall home dressing. As you can see, this space doesn't necessarily look like something that we wanted to put into the project. It's still in its natural state. So it had a lot of work to do when it came to the project, but being able to send this photo to the production designer that you end up working with is fantastic, because then you can actually move forward and they make all the decisions for you on that end. And you can come back to knowing that you don't have to make all those individual selections yourself. And this kind of leads to the greatest point of working with a great team, because there's just too many things to do when it comes to large productions like this. There's just so many moving parts. And knowing that everyone on the team is doing their own specialty and working towards the same goal is the best part of this. With the Sherlock homie, we had a large list of things that were very specific to this detective feeling. We wanted to make it feel like it was like in that 70s, 80s look with a magnifying glass, kind of like a smoky space. And really wanted to play up on this vintage idea that this detective kind of looked like Sherlock Holmes. One of the original ideas based off of something Nico has done in the past is create a custom word puzzle. When they shot in Italy, they brought a newspaper that was custom created. And we kind of wanted to do a throwback on that because we thought it'd be cool. A detective is always searching for clues and stuff like that. But funny enough, we wanted to just switch it and play up on the idea that he was working on a crossword puzzle and that was what he was a detective for. So a little bit different, a little bit more fun, and like ended up being a big part of the project. It's all the little details that actually add up to the end. In this tech scout, we used Cadridge just to give us a better sense of what the focal lengths were going to be, what camera we were using, and then kind of the formats as well. This is always important for us when it comes to projects because we want to know exactly what's going to look like. We want to remove any guess game as much as we can, because we used to go on projects all the time where we just thought, okay, let's just show up on the day of and we'll figure it out in post. And that was just the most stressful thing, and it never worked out. And it was always stressful for the entire team because you're just scrambling to get as many shots as you could. Now, over time of working through enough projects and commercial work with agencies and such, we just have a system now that's specific to making sure that you have every single piece dialed in before you even get to production. And then when you get to production, it's fairly straightforward. You're not even doing much besides filling out the exact things that you were already shooting. For example, we knew we were going to shoot into this corner. So we made it very apparent to the production designer and the team that we were going to shoot in this corner and just focus there. With that in mind, you don't really waste time on set figuring out, oh, do we want to shoot backlit? Do we want to shoot with the side here? It's like, it's very clear for everyone on board, especially the gaffer as well, because everyone's going to be moving and doing their specific things. Clarity is so important when it comes to these sets now, because once everyone's clear on every direction, everyone could just move forward. With the tracksuit, we knew we were going to do a treadmill scene. Initially, this was actually going to be shot into this corner here. Once we got there, we realized there was going to be a lot of switches and changes. So you could plan as much as you can as well. Sometimes things change in between and you have to be ready to make those adjustments on the fly. And so what it was originally going to be inside this room here ended up being a multiple shot sequence where we had him walking around different spaces to play up on the idea that he felt like he was walking in one spot, but really we were just constantly moving him and putting him in different spots, walking him on a treadmill, which I've seen before in the past. It's the only way you can have someone walking naturally in one spot without it looking like they're fake walking. You actually need them to be walking normally. So that was the initial idea anyways. With the Picasso bug, this was the original location here. There's a lot to do, as you can see. This is how potential locations can show up, and then just taking photos and reference photos of everything so you can always put stuff back when you're done. With the Picasso bug scene, we wanted to make the main character Picasso, or a painter. And so the idea was that the painter can only see this one pattern that keeps coming to his mind. And this plays up into the scene of like him being in therapy, thinking and talking through his thoughts. And the idea was that he was going to keep painting this one painting and it would be everywhere. So in the final scene, you'd see he finishes his painting. He's excited for it, puts it up, and then he realizes that, oh, hey, this is the same painting and I can't get it out of my head. We actually only did one painting. The rest was VFX. We had a great VFX team that helped us out on that and made it look a lot more natural, but it saved us a lot of time. And so knowing where your limitations are is actually great because we can save money on set, not having multiple canvases made, but also save us time when it comes to pre-production, stuff like this, because we knew it was going to be VFX. So we could just do simple paintings on the wall with all white canvas and then just have it marked for VFX. This is a big thing with every project that we do, is understanding that sometimes you can fix a lot of things in post. And that's not to say that the joke is just do everything in post. It's actually figuring out where your limitations are and where your budget ends. And then knowing that, okay, great, this lighting is not 100% perfect, but I know if I've worked with post enough, and specifically color, that I can actually just fix this in post. And they can change the color, or they can, maneuver or shift or finesse, whatever you want to call it, into the right space of where you're trying to get to. Here are all the location photos that we've sent, just to give the production designer a good feel of what we have here, and then what she can take and what she can use. So some of this stuff stayed in here because it worked out for the space. It had that kind of mid-century modern feel already, but then the majority of it, we actually had the production designer rent out chairs and sofas and everything in between. So it's always good to go there beforehand, do a proper location scout, give everyone a good feel for what's to come, because if we didn't have this for a production designer, she might be completely lost or confused when it came to actually what to rent out. You're trying to minimize as many guest game when it comes to this stuff. It's just so important to actually know, hey, this is important for people, and it's important for people to do their jobs efficiently and cohesively. So you guys all work as a single team, and just being transparent and open with like budgets and understanding, okay, I can't afford every single piece to be done. How about I use half of these things and like we put the budget somewhere else that can be helpful. Same thing, here are all the plans, here's all the paintings and sides and chairs and stuff that we can use. A lot of this stuff just ended up getting shifted out. Character design. The characters in this are unique in the sense that it's played by one character, our main character, Temi. He was playing a unique role of playing every single scenario that we were going to put him in. So it turned out really well that he was able to play up on each of these unique ideas. So when he played a detective or a painter, he really sat into this role. Editing. With post-production, it was fairly straightforward with this edit. We almost followed exactly this plan when it came to the edit, making sure that the story made sense and that we were following each of these story beats so that we can kind of flow through. You'll see from the treatment to the end result that we stayed very on point with the actual storyline. We tried to hit every single piece when it came to the therapy, the Sherlock homie, the tracksuit, and back to the therapy, as well as the Picasso bug and the sounds hoodie. This is a very condensed way to do things, but again, when it comes to pre-production, splitting everything up is actually going to be a better process for you, and finding the system that works for you. When we first started, it was a bit of a mix mash. We didn't have this much direction when it came to projects. We kind of just had like the overall creative, and we try to work our way into it. Over time, we realized that if you can figure it all out in pre-production, then production is one of the easiest things. And once you have everything approved in pre-production, then post is even easier. It's just a matter of actually putting it all together. Sometimes you want to add some sauce here and there on the edit, but otherwise this is super straightforward. It's just a matter of changing out the songs and the sounds. So remember when you're doing this stuff that make sure everything makes sense for you as well as the client, and making sure that everything is approved, because you don't want to keep going and making the decisions and hoping that everyone's going to be happy in post-production and realizing that you're either missing shots or the story doesn't make sense. There's a lot of times where we got back to post and realized, oh damn, we actually don't have all the shots that we need. And there's nothing you can really do at that point unless you do a reshoot, but sometimes it's actually not possible at all. So at the end of the day, making sure that you're ready and prepared when it comes to pre-production so that everyone on the chain of commands knows exactly what's going on. Sound design. For a company that's based around sound, it was important for us to make sure that we were hitting every mark, whether it was the score or the sound effects. When it came to this project, we had a great score composer as well as sound effects person that worked on this project. For us, it was important to have someone on set to capture live audio, as it both helps us in post-production as well as post-audio to figure out exactly where everything lines up. In this project, we had Adrian Belair scoring the project, and then we had Evan Miles doing the sound engineering and SFX. Adrian we've worked with a ton before, so he has a good sense of how we actually operate. And then Evans as well was new for us, and it was a great opportunity to try new things and see how everyone puts their spin on things. Ultimately, this came out really well for us, and we were happy and client was happy with the overall aspects of the sound. Now let's jump into my favorite topic of this project, the color. When it came to color, I wanted to work with this colorist for a long time. His name is Cameron Marigold. He colors over at Ethos in the States. For this project, it worked a little bit differently. Typically, when we work in Canada, we can either do a remote session or a live session. When it came to this one, we did postings. A posting is actually where they do the coloring session first on their own end, and then they send you back an export. And from there, you make live adjustments through like a Frame.io link or something similar. Because we had very specific look and feel references for this project, it made it very easy for the colorist to get a feel for what we were going for, that 35mm film look. We wanted to push some blues in the colors, really make the colors and oranges pop. For us, the contrast between the colors were going to be really important, making the greens shift into that kind of film green, as well as the reds pop between everything. This was great for us because the whole production design was built off of color. How do we get as much color contrast within the shot? And from there, using the color to actually enhance it at the end and make everything pop. And here's how we took everything from pre-production, production, and post-production and put it into this final product. We would say it's fairly close to exactly what we put into the treatment, which is great for us because that means that all of our ideas came through and the only small changes came from working with the location and adjusting where needed. Oftentimes, you're not going to have a perfect production. I don't think that really exists that often. You're always going to make small tweaks here and there. And that's typically what you learn when you work on productions of this scale. Whether there's budget or not, there's always going to be changes. And hopefully they're not large changes when it comes on set because you want to just keep things as tight as possible. But when it comes to projects of this scale where you have a little bit more creative leeway, figuring all that stuff out in pre-production is going to really help you out all the way through. The 3 biggest lessons that I've learned on this project: make sure that you're staying organized. When it comes to projects like this, regardless of the scale that we try to work on, try to work at your best level. I know it's kind of cliched to say stuff like that, like who's not working at their best capacity, but stuff like this can transform your whole life. Working on a project of this scale takes up a lot of time and energy. You don't want to be putting so many hours into this project where you have a huge team, you're spending money, and at the end of the day, you don't get a result that you're looking for. Some of the most important things to learn from this is to stay organized. If you're staying organized from the beginning to the end, you're going to be getting through projects with no problem. It's when things get a little bit sloppy is that when we notice, oh, okay, things are getting a little bit more stressful than normal. The second thing is finding a great team. When you have a great team, you can actually just rely on people to do their specialties, and you can focus on the thing that you want to be focusing on. In this case, it was directing and being creative and making sure that the client was happy in all the shots that we were getting. When you split your brain too much and you're focusing on other aspects, you end up being lost in everything and not being able to put your best foot forward when it comes to the stuff that you need to be focusing on. And the third thing is something that I always talk about. Whenever you have a project come in, try to execute on the highest level first and then work your way backwards based off of budget or restraints. And when it comes to projects like this, just know that it's not always about making money. Sometimes it's the relationships that matter, or it's the style of work that you want to try. There's something technical that you want to learn. There's a lot of ways to grow in this business, and to me, the most important thing is actually the relationships. So knowing that a relationship is the key, you can actually go way further with that than the project itself.
So, if I'm hearing this right, in your dream, you're a detective. Interesting. And you said something about feeling stuck. Going nowhere. Do you feel like you're going nowhere in life? So tell me about this print you see everywhere. So what do you think? What do you think? So, what do you think?
So let us know in the comments below if you thought we came pretty close to the director's treatment or not. And if you really want to elevate your shots when it comes to projects like this, which is what we focused on, check out this video that we dedicated on about cinematic movements.